Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's LinkedIn Live. I am so excited about our conversation today about DEI, workplace inclusion, and well-being at work. And I cannot think of any better guest than the amazing Denise Hamilton. I'm going to tell you more about her in just a moment. But Denise, I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
So Denise, where are you coming from? I'm in Bend, Oregon right now. Where are you?
I am in Houston, Texas, at the height of allergy season. It's a lot
Okay.
of
And there are some beautiful spots to walk in Houston, unbeknownst to many on the outside, but would love to hear from our listeners here. Where are you coming from? And just as I always ask you to do, please share your comments, please share your questions. And again, thank you so much to everyone who was with us today. And of course, this will be recorded. So for those who weren't able to make it, you'll get to hear it as well. So meet Denise Hamilton. She is author, speaker, inclusion specialist. She's nationally recognized workplace culture and DEI expert, founder and CEO of WatchHerWork. WatchHerWork, which is a digital learning platform for professional women. She's also the creator of All Hands Group, a workplace culture consultancy, speaker and facilitator. She's worked with dozens of Fortune 500 companies such as GE, Apple, IBM, Shell, BP, Meta, and many others. And she's got an amazing new book, which I got it right here. Indivisible. Described by Van Jones as a force for unity, a powerful yet surprisingly practical read. And that really struck me as well. And I think also what I would add, Denise, is a surprisingly vulnerable book as well. And I think this is kind of treacherous territory here, talking about this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion. And in fact, you even suggest in your book that let's move beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion, and let's talk about something else, something we're going to be talking about today. But I would love it if you could tee us up with sharing this powerful opening story in your book, which I have not been able to stop thinking about. So tee us up there with, can you tell us a little bit about this story and how that led to your idea of being indivisible?
Happy to. So I care deeply about women's health and have for many years. And I was reading some statistics about maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates among Black women. And they were unacceptable. They were just incredibly high relative to the general population. And quite frankly, I was apoplectic. I was furious. How did we let this happen? Why aren't we doing something? Why aren't we in the streets marching? This is unacceptable, you know? And the very next day, I heard a statistic that surprised me about the sheer number of suicides among white males in the United States. And I didn't care. It didn't hit me the same way. I didn't think about it or feel passionately about it the same way as I had just the day before. And I started thinking about that. I started kind of ruminating on it. And what is that about? Right. And so I did what I always do when I come across a problem like that. I started reading and researching and watching different documentaries and reading articles about why the suicide rate among white males was one of the highest in the world. And started to see this like commonality between these two groups of having expectations, whether they be low expectations or high expectations. It's both tyranny, right? It's both a cage that we're in that precludes us from being really sensitive to each other's needs and desires and wants. And that got me thinking about like the real challenges to being truly inclusive, which is stepping outside of our experience and making sure we're caring about each other and seeing our interconnectedness, and, in this case, as a nation, but even as a team within a company or even in a family. What tears people apart is the lack of willingness to care deeply about what the needs are of the other person. And so how do we give rebirth to this idea of being indivisible, of being separate, together, right? Like being individual parts, salad bowl, not melting pot, but being interconnected and really loving that and being clear on that. The best example of being indivisible that I have is the human body. The heart and the lungs don't argue about which is more important. Um, your legs are the most powerful muscle group in your body, and they can take you anywhere, but you're going nowhere if the little structures in your ear don't take care of your balance. You're on the couch, right? So it's not about size or position, or it's just not about that. It's about every part being able to do its part to the highest level of its ability. That's how you get optimal conditions. And that's what I want for us as a country.
To be indivisible. Yeah. We've got people coming in from Denver, Huntsville, Alabama, Michigan, interesting part of the country right now with the uncommitted votes coming in. Hello from Midtown Manhattan. And then we also have, and that's from Bernadette, who I was just speaking with just now, Bernadette Beekman, who's been doing some great work in the legal field for both women as well as people of color. So I want to, highlight some of these things that you're bringing up here. You're talking about how Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. Even for someone like Serena Williams, you tell the story about how even someone like of hers, someone who's so well known, obviously has resources, and yet almost died in childbirth because she wasn't taken seriously. Her symptoms weren't taken seriously. But meanwhile, white men experiencing what researchers have characterized as deaths of despair, and one form of it being through suicide, and that while they account for 30% of the population, they account for 70% of the suicides. And I just love the way you framed up, in my experience, white men had everything. They were society's winners. They got the good jobs and the nice houses, and they didn't care about me. As a Black woman, my whole life had been spent navigating their rules and battling their countless arbitrary advantages. But then you go on with this realization, as you were just talking about, I had been plagued my whole life by the cruel violence of low expectations. But I had never really considered the converse, which is that some white men are literally being crushed by failure in the face of idealized expectations. And so you frame up this idea that both are wearing masks, albeit different masks, but that leads to this kind of this disconnect. And so often, I think in a lot of our DEI efforts, we're kind of speaking about one group, but we're not speaking about all of the groups and their varied experiences.
Yeah, I think that it's difficult, right? Because we're trying to solve specific problems, right? And there's this kind of energy that you can't solve all of the problems. Let's pick one at a time and kind of tackle them. But what I struggle with and what I kind of tackle in the book is that it's all kind of the same problem, right? There's this idea that we have to figure out how to be together in a respectful environment, in a way that acknowledges our unique differences, right? I don't want heart disease research to be done on men and then extrapolated to women. I want the research to be done on women, right? before you give me a pill or tell me what I need to do. So there are specific needs, but also that that it's not pie. Like caring about you doesn't cheat me out of caring about me. Like this is not a finite, limited resource. We all live here together, and we need to care about each other and relate to each other in a way that optimizes the space for all of us. We all do better if we're interested in the well-being of one another.
And you talk about this idea about it's about a commitment to one another. And right now, what we're struggling with is basically, as you characterize, a lack of commitment at being at the root of so many of our problems, education to economic opportunity to our health and our well-being. So a question that I have for you, I mean, do you feel like that in this charged time that we're in, that to some degree we are less committed to one another than we have been in the past? Or is this something that has always been the case and you're advocating for us moving beyond that?
Ooh, it's such a good question because I think it's the question of our time, to be honest with you. Is it live? Oh, those of us that are old enough to know the slogan, is it live or is it Memorex? Is it live or is it real? You know, like I think that we are in a environment of so much disinformation and so much the bottom line is people are monetizing our separation, right? The dissonance, the anger, the frustration. They make money off of that. You click more if you're angry, right? So I have to remind people sometimes, like, we're not as dire as you feel like we are. We are making progress. People say things like DEI doesn't work. It absolutely does. You don't fight against things that don't work, right? You don't suppress votes that don't matter. If it didn't matter if you voted, people wouldn't be talking you out of it the way they are. So we've made a lot of progress, right? And I think this idea of seeing the world through this negative lens of lack of possibility is one of the biggest challenges that we have. We have a crisis of hopelessness and helplessness, which is really strange because we're kind of the most powerful people on planet Earth. Let's just be honest. That's who we are. And to walk around the world with a air of helplessness is just bizarre. Like, where did that come from? Where are we getting that? I have a historical muse in Harriet Tubman. And here's this amazing woman who was enslaved, couldn't read, couldn't write, didn't have a map, didn't have a horse, didn't know anybody in the North, had a seizure disorder. And she ran by herself from the South to the North to her freedom, then turned around and came back and got people, 3 people, then 5 people, then 4 people. Like, do we have less than Harriet Tubman in the 1800s? No, we have so much more. We're so much more powerful than we realize. So we've been talked out of our power. And that's the opportunity, right? That's the excitement. That's what wakes me up every day. That if I can remind everyone listening to me who we are, if we could channel some of that Mothers Against Drunk Drivers energy. Do you remember that energy of our kids are dying, we're not having it, seatbelts, drinking laws, age limits? Like, how are they able to do it? They did it because they thought they could. The only people that could change the world are the ones who think they can. So I think this crisis of despair is what we gotta jettison. We have to jettison it immediately because it's cheating us out of the possibilities of the future. And unfortunately, there's always going to be people that are extractors, that are here to take advantage. They're just collecting the eggs from the golden goose. They're not interested in feeding that goose. And those of us that are mature, responsible, committed, we know that you have to tend your garden. You have to sweep your porch. You have to plant and water, and you have to do the things that maintain the reality you say you want. And so that's what we have to get back to. There are people who are not only abandoning their responsibility to plant trees for the next generation, they're trying to pluck up the trees somebody else planted, right? Are we going to allow that? You know, I always say there's more of us in the middle. Are we going to sit by and allow that? Because that's really where we are.
And you talk about, really for us to move beyond this framework of hopelessness and helplessness, that activate the middle, and we can transition from looking at how we're opponents to instead looking at how we might be teammates, and where are the points of intersection, where might we agree. And I'm imagining that when you're brought in to work with companies around and teams around inclusion efforts, that this is a lot of what you bring, this kind of framework is what you bring forward. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we all want to have successful companies. We all want to have healthy communities. We all want to be safe in our communities. We want to have an educated workforce that we can tap into. Like, we don't disagree about these things, right? So I'm always struck by how easy it is to reduce the whole world down to two perspectives. This is a big, huge, multifaceted reality. What on earth would make you think you could reduce it to two parties and their approach to it? Like, we just need to be in a creative stance and a creative posture. And we've kind of gotten to a space where we celebrate people that obstruct rather than people who create. Right. I'm looking for the problem solvers. And, it's so interesting, especially I do a lot of work with executive women and women in leadership. And they're such incredible doers that when I talk to male leaders, I'm like, you should be throwing the doors open. You want these women in here because they make things happen and they're such activators. And so as we think about the way we want to live, I think if we think about it from the position of wanting to build and to develop, we won't argue about some things. We won't argue if school children should have lunch. We won't argue if, there should be hospitals and access to healthcare in rural areas. Like, these are not things we would argue about if we saw ourselves as teammates rather than opponents. Instead, we kind of use them as bargaining chips instead of focusing on solving the problems of the people. And so how do we shift that? And how do we, as the average everyday person, demand it from our leaders and contribute to it as individuals? What do we need to be doing to create the country, the team, the organization that we want? And if I want a team that works well together, then I want them to understand each other. I want them to connect. I want them to have tolerance for each other. I want them to capitalize on each other's strengths. I don't want them to be disagreeing over silly quibbling things because they have miscommunication that could have easily been avoided, right? So we all want the same things. And I think focusing on that and aligning ourselves around that is how you get a truly indivisible team.
I think, though, it's really interesting, the shift in pronoun from kind of my to our. Why should I pay for their kids as I'm going to pay for my kids and their education? What happens to these other kids? That's not my problem. Or even thinking about, are we focused just within the United States, or do we continue to see ourselves as a nation, as a leader on the global stage, on the world stage? It really is kind of more insular versus more focused on what's good for everyone. So how have you been able to get leaders and on all levels to really help people to shift their mindset from that my to our, from that I to we?
I think we see so many examples all around us of how the fabric of our communities fray and fall apart when we don't maintain them. Leaders are seeing that. They're seeing the caliber of employees that they have in their labor pool. They're seeing turnover. They're seeing issues of homelessness in the communities that they're operating businesses in. They're not immune to it. They see it too. I've been to San Francisco and New Orleans in the last couple weeks, and I observed the similar phenomenon that really alarmed me. I was in New Orleans and leaving the hotel, and the staff almost tackled me. Where are you going? How far are you walking? Go this way, don't go that way, because they were afraid of me being victimized by crime, right? And I had the same experience in San Francisco. I was brought in to speak, and they put me at a big fancy hotel, gorgeous, and I'm walking out the door, and they're like, wait, where are you going? And go this way and go that way. And I'm walking down the street, and I'm stepping over human feces in the street on the sidewalk. It doesn't matter how gated you are, how rich you are, how wealthy you are. Like, that's not real. We all have to figure out how we're going to live and operate together. Trying to avoid, challenge rather than deal with it. That's not That's not the way. We can do hard things. We are a group of people that sent someone to the moon in a tin can, not with computers, not even as sophisticated as the phones we walk around with in our pockets. We can do hard things. When did we give up on that? When did we give up on building and laying foundations for the future? That's what we have to return to. And it's difficult because we live in an extraction model, even for leaders. What have you done lately? You're judged by the last quarter. You're judged by the last 6 months, right? But we have to kind of shift away from that day-to-day thinking to a longer view of what kind of country do we want to have? What kind of company and organization do we want to have? And we've done it. When we figured out that we needed programmers, right? This is a perfect example. And programmers tended to be wearing jeans, hoodies. They may have a nose ring. They may have pink hair. All of a sudden, we changed the rules of the office, and all those people could come in and do whatever they needed to do. Why? Because we needed them. That's the point. We need each other. We need each other to operate. And the more we allow people to give their giftedness to our activities, the more productive we are. So we have all of these examples. Let's just keep following the example.
And I think part of it is that we notice the bright spots. I actually live in San Francisco. That's my community. And, now when I travel and I say I'm from San Francisco, people say, "Oh my gosh, it's horrible there." And I say, "No, actually, it's still a great place to live." And we want to kind of zero in on what's wrong with things, because if something's wrong with it, then we can just write it off, as opposed to, no, there's still bright spots there. We can still work with this. So I want to remind our listeners, please pose your questions or your comments. I know that Denise would be happy to respond to them. But Denise, let's start walking through your book a little bit here. And, one of the things that I love that you talked about is this idea of letting go of broken stories. And as part of that, you talked about how we are attracted to people who share our shorthand. And it reminded me of having heard Condoleezza Rice speak. This was way back in 1988, and she talked about how people have a tendency to travel to different parts of the world, and they come back with this conclusion of like, oh, they're just like us. And she said, but they miss the point, because they're not. We are not all just alike. And instead of looking for ways that we are the same, let's appreciate and embrace the way that we're different, and how might we, celebrate those. And so I think that letting go of these broken stories, as you characterize, is kind of part of this. And under the part 1 in your book, choose uncomfortable truth over beloved lies. So let's start there, Denise.
Yes, I love that quote from Condoleezza, because the truth of it is we center ourselves. Part of the problem of all of this is we put ourselves at the center, even of someone else's story. It's shocking. So let's stop doing that. And we do have a lot of broken stories. I was in my 40s, like well into my 40s, before it ever occurred to me to challenge the story of Rapunzel. You remember Rapunzel, inappropriately long hair, locked in the tower, no door. She uses her hair to help her mother, the witch, get in and out of the tower. She helps the prince get in and out of the tower. Why did it never even occur to us to ask, girl, use your own hair and get yourself out of the tower? It never even occurred to me, right? And
Right.
we have so many stories like that. Good Little Mermaid, you can have the man of your dreams. All you have to do is give up your voice.
Right.
Or Beauty and the Beast. Belle finds her father in a dungeon. He is starving. He is sick. He is freezing. She trades her freedom for his freedom. Now she's locked in the tower, in the palace. One night, the beast scares her so badly that she runs into the wolf-infested frozen woods to get away from him. Now, how do they end up living happily ever after?
Right.
It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. But what's the moral? True love can turn a beast into a prince.
Right. Right.
These are the stories that we have running around in our heads. We're supposed to be like Sleeping Beauty, laying in the woods and waiting for somebody to come save us, right? And the thing is, our
And we
story.
do it through passive beauty. As long as we're beautiful enough and we're passive
Yes, as
enough,
long as
it's
you're
just really
young,
wonderful.
beautiful, you can have whatever you want. And I'm like, the women over 50, my peer, my group, they are so hardcore and amazing. And we sideline and marginalize so
Yeah.
many women after a certain age. Like, what
Yeah.
is this all about? It's our stories of what a leader looks like. You have to be this tall, you have to have this voice, you have to have this look. No, you can be 4'9" and be a leader.
Yep.
Have a soft voice and be a leader, right? Like we have to release these stories that tell us what the truth is. We need to seek the truth, and that's a different skill set. Being a keeper of the story is different than being a truth seeker, right? And we need to be truth seekers, right? Is it true that when you're hiring, that you should give advantage to somebody with a sexy internship at Google? I would say no. Why do I say no? You know who gets a sexy internship at Google? A person whose mom has a friend at Google. That's
Right.
how it happens. So, like, why would that advantage you in the hiring process, right? We have to kind of look at these echoes, these things that don't mean what we've ascribed them to mean, and instead give people a chance. Let them come into the interview. I know I talked to a lot of hiring teams that they don't even interview people if they didn't go to these 10 schools. And I'm like, what is that all about? Like, who are you leaving out of your selection pool by doing that? These are stories. These are stories. I don't know about you, but I was obsessed with the cheating scandal of a couple years ago. Obsessed. I was obsessed because for all my life, I've been told, oh, the Ivy League is better. And then you see this nationwide cheating scandal of people having people take the test for them or submitting that they do a sport they don't even play. Like, these are not truths. They are just myths that our society kind of maintains. So how do you as an individual open up your aperture, right? Open it up and allow the story to be different. Let the story change.
And you move on from there to, I mean, I know we're kind of jumping to the latter part of your book. Listen for the echoes, like really listen for what the real story is. I have to tell you, in all candor, everybody in my family went to Harvard, and both my parents, my mom is, I think, on this right now, my grandparents, my uncle, everybody. And in my interview, the interviewer asked, he said, so who in your family did not go to Harvard? And it was a bygone conclusion that I would be accepted, which of course I was. So we need to listen to those stories. And it's not to say that, maybe I would have gotten in had I not had that legacy, but maybe I wouldn't have. But we need to be real about what the qualifications are that we see that may not actually be qualifications. So you talk about being an owner, not a renter, moving from the middle, and then listening for echoes. So this is a book that everybody needs to get. And I know that one of the things that you talk about also in there is just the importance of engaging leaders, particularly managers. This is something that I have been working on as well. I've got a course on LinkedIn Learning called Managers as Multipliers of Well-Being. So encourage everyone to do that. Also encourage everyone to follow your work, Denise. Buy the book, and in particular, buy it at your local independent bookstore. Support those wonderful people and those wonderful businesses. Our next speaker is going to be Kat Cole, who happens to be a friend of yours. I'm so happy to hear that. She's the president and COO of Athletic Greens. She'll be my guest here on March 18th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So, Denise, in our last minute here, what are the top 3 takeaways that you would like our listeners to come away with?
Well, it's really easy. Number 1, you are more powerful than you know. No more powerlessness, no more hopelessness, no more helplessness. You can do so many incredible things. Let's get to work. Number 2, let the story change. We have to allow some of these mythologies to fall away so that we can let every person be as amazing as their giftedness allows them to be. So we got to let the story change. And number 3, if you say you love America, you're going to have to try to love Americans. We're going to have to be kinder to
Ooh.
each other, gentler with each other, more patient. We are on the same team. Let's not allow ourselves to fall into a paradigm of opponents. We're not opponents. We want our country to be successful. So let's work to that end and stop humiliating each other, stop denigrating each other and name calling. Let's work on the problems and let's start loving each other again.
And I just want to know, are you running for president? You got my vote. That is such a powerful summation. You are more powerful than you know. Let the story change. And love, if you say you love America, then for goodness sake, love Americans. Denise, I want to thank you so much. We got a question here. When is your next book signing? Do you want to?
Oh, we are all over the country. We have a few in we have Chicago coming up, Dallas, LA, another one in Houston. Go to Indivisible now and you'll be able to see the schedule. It's going up, I think, tomorrow. And then you can tap in wherever I am. And I'd love to see you.
Denise, I want to thank you so much for being my guest. You were amazing. I want to thank everyone who joined our conversation today. We'll look forward to seeing all of you on March 18th at 11 a.m. And Denise, I cannot wait to see where your book goes. Here's the book, everyone, once again, and where you go. You're really helping to lead the world forward in a way that needs to be led. So thank you again for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everybody.